Okay, so maybe okay, yeah, okay, we start now. Yeah, okay, it is a great pleasure to introduce NUS Master of Architecture program. I'm Tsuto Sakamoto, the Associate Professor NUS, Program Director for Master of Architecture. Let me share screen now to share my slides. Okay, can everybody see it? Yeah, okay, all right, yeah, okay. Enrolled by approximately 240 students currently, the program always maintains its vibrancy. The students are working on their drawings and making models, chatting, laughing, and committing to the serious conversations on and off campus. Our motto is here, as Asia's leading design and research institute for architecture, the program committed to a comprehensive and a deep understanding of opportunities and the challenges of architecture in Asia's context. The program also encourages students to navigate their learning experience independently and acquire knowledge as designers, intellectuals, and citizens who are going to shape the built environment creatively. Okay, the education in the program is mainly consisted of 3 semesters of MH option design studios, core graduate level modules and the graduate level electives, and the final semesters MH design thesis. Okay, and then also the program is a professional degree course that leads students to be a licensed architect in Singapore to familiarize themselves with a professional work. The students participate in an architecture internship program, so-called AIP, for 6 months while they are in MH1, if the students are concurrent degree students. Okay, the option studio is a research-based design experiment. Unlike undergraduate studios, where the students acquire fundamental knowledge and skill, in this, the option studio, they commit to a highly critical and experimental design. Every year, we offer more than 30 studios. MH 1 and 2 students work together for a peer learning that is called vertical studios. The studio topics and design methods are diverse depending on the studio leaders. And then the studios are offered by local and international architects and then researchers, the researchers. The projects are all deep in their thoughts, and then thoughtful and then skillful presentations are required. The students produce a diverse, the products that include a video, the computer simulation, and the physical models, and then artistic installations, in addition to conventional drawings. Some of the option studios are taught by visiting professors from Europe, the United States, and Asia. The last academic year, as our Onsume visiting professors, we invited the Prof. Sin-Min Fong from SciArc, Los Angeles, and then from CJ, and then also Prof. CJ Lim from UCL Bartlett, London. Both the prestigious, the educators come architects from a well-known institute of architectural education. Our in-house faculties are also prestigious in a variety of research areas and highly experienced in design education. The graduate level core modules and the elective offer are approximately 20 modules that provide the opportunity for students to learn highly specialized knowledge in history and theory, urbanism, technology, sustainability, landscape, and then others. The MH Architectural Design Thesis is a culmination of the whole education in the MH program. The total 34 supervisors are consisted of in-house faculties, adjunct professors, and professional architects who are specialized in a variety of areas in the studies. Based on their interest, the students pursue their own topics and issues through design research. Not just remaining as a problem-solving exercise, the project explores socio-political, philosophical, and environmental issues critically and pursue a role of architecture within such contexts. The form and the aesthetics of architecture are part and parcel of their exploration. The students learn appropriate the media and the expressions for their architecture. To keep a high quality of education in an MArch level, it is very important to have intellectual discussions. Even under the recent COVID-19 pandemics, we kept presenting guest lectures to the audience, publics, and so on by Zoom and face-to-face sometime. The last year, we invited approximately 10 speakers. They include Chatpon Chuen Rudimo from Bangkok, and Kengo Kumar from Tokyo, and Craig Hodgetts and Simeon Pham from Los Angeles. Interim and the final reviews of a student's works are the best place to develop good conversations. Reviewers and then the studio leaders take students' works very, very seriously and do their best to develop intellectual discussions. These events contribute to the architectural culture that we architects and scholars have developed in a long history of architectural education, and we continue and extend the culture. At the same time, the education full of diversity and then emphasizing independence, we hope our graduates are future ready, the future of diversity. So at this moment, I'd like to invite our former graduate from our MArch program. Let me drop the share screen. Yeah. Okay, Miss Li Huilian, the registered architect, and then Mr. Marvin Tan, co-founder of a creative director of a Plus. Hi, Huilian and Marvin.
Hello, hi.
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 Yeah. In your presentation, I'd like you to refer to what was the significance of a MArch program and then its education for you. And then maybe what was the experience as a student when you are in school. And then probably what is your creative practice and how did the education contribute to it? Maybe we can start from Huilian, please.
Okay, allow me to share screen. So I think drawing relevance to where I was and where I am now, I thought it would be good to share my MArch thesis project. This was in 2010, so about slightly less than 12 years ago. So back then, I think in a similar approach as what is happening in the curriculum now, we were pretty much given quite a free range in the kind of topics that we wanted to explore. With the guidance of the tutors, we had a period of time where we could kind of research. So I think what was if I recall, 12 years ago, the kind of experience was quite rigorous. There was a lot of research, evaluation, and critical thinking, I must say, because in kind of thesis approach, there wasn't a fixed problem or solution that we solved. We had to kind of look into what is the existing scenario and perhaps suggest different hypotheses and research methodology to address the thesis topic. So for my work then, it was called the Archiving the Anesthetized Landscape. So what I was kind of dealing with was maybe a little bit abstract, in a sense that I was kind of charting the development of Singapore's landform and how do we archive this changing relationship of this expanding land. So the idea of this reclamation that has been going through over the years, and how do we then know what was before, what was then, in terms of charting this land formula. So I think that was one of the thing that I was exploring then, and we had to propose certain kind of ideas to address this issue. So my intervention was a series of interventions along the borders of the changing landscape of Singapore's sea line. Yeah, so this was done during my MArch thesis, and yeah. So I think alongside thesis, I was also working on a dissertation, which was questioning the history of the SIT flats. This was eventually edited to be part of a book publication. So on top of just being a kind of design project, there was a writing part of it that was also again required research and certain exploration into something that I was quite interested about, which was essentially the history of the SIT flats. So I think in that kind of spirit, I'm a practicing architect now. I've been with the same company farm for about 10 years, and I've recently also started doing my little own project at the site. So I'll be sharing a series of projects that I had undertaken over the past 10 years. So the first one is this barn houses, is a full-on architecture project. What we did was to redevelop a plot of land which originally housed a single-story bungalow. The client had 3 sons, 2 daughters, and she wanted them to all live in a village. So I guess this was again, our interpretation of a village living in a quite densely populated city like Singapore. So we don't have the luxury of having a village setting, but this was almost somewhat a vertical village in that sense. So this was a barn house, a series of 2 bungalows and 2 semi-Ds that house all my clients and their sons and daughters, but everyone having different houses. So that was the idea for this project. Alongside architecture, I was also working on a couple of exhibition projects as well, dealing with the National Museum and National Gallery. So this was one of the exhibition that we did in 2017 called The Century of Light. So you can see that unlike architecture, this was a little bit more restricted. We had to deal with existing shell of the museum, but we tried to again think of certain ideas that we could inject in display of the artworks, or rather in how we sequence the different segments of the gallery. So we use this idea of arch, and we kind of played with perspective. So I guess this was a little bit of influence from architecture. The idea of a perspective was adopted into creating this a bit of a illusion of space, creating the false depth within the walls. So this was one of the exhibition projects that we did in 2017 at the National Gallery. And then this is Museum House. So again, I think in terms of references and ideas, usually we start off with having, again, like a thesis, a brief, but we tried to think about what are the various ways to create interesting spaces. So for this particular project term, the Museum House, we adopted a kind of monolithic, coherent language for the architecture, because essentially the client had a lot of collection. You can see from the image in the bottom right, lots of antiques, and then that became itself the thing that we celebrated in the house. That's why we term it the Museum House, because they really have lots of collection in the house. This is fairly recent, picturing the pandemic exhibition, which was just last year at the National Museum. So this was taking into consideration certain documentation of the pandemic. So what was happening then, and certain very we never imagined would happen in our time kind of imagery. So you can see from the left images, when you go to the hawker center, the things are all spaced out in 1 meter spacing. There's tapes here and there's restrictions here and there. So a little play of what's happening. So and what is being displayed as well. So a mix of 3D and 2D kind of representation for the exhibition. And the idea was that we had a central circular sanctuary, which was almost like it's like after you go through almost 1.5 years of being in a dark space, we arrive at this sanctuary. So in this way, the idea of a storytelling and experiential kind of journey is explored. So through different spaces, we tried to imagine what is the idea behind creating the space. So what we also adopted was the first segment was fairly dark, and we arrived at a much brighter, more hopeful space at the end. So this was another exhibition that we did. And perhaps I'd just like to share the last project, which I worked on a couple of years ago. It's a restaurant called Sky. It has recently just closed. So what we did was to relook into the branding of the restaurant itself. So the restaurant was housed in an old school, old secondary school called the Monk's Hill Secondary School. So taking certain cues from what was on site, we kind of proposed, firstly, the branding and the name of the restaurant, Skive. So the idea of skiving in school was related into the restaurant. And then down to designing the menu, it was like a thesis booklet when you flip the menu. And then down to choosing the furniture, a little bit play of old school furniture like the chairs, but with a certain weird proportion, just to have a little fun in this making of the experience lah. So this was one of the projects where we re-questioned the entire idea from the beginning, not just clients giving us a restaurant and then we just do an interior decoration. It was really down to creating quite a holistic experience right from the naming of the restaurant. So I think, yeah, this is broadly what I've been doing over the 10 years. And I guess the idea of or rather the experience from what I learned in architecture was a lot of questioning what's existing and kind of re-looking into what is already there, and is there another way to look at certain perspective of a problem or what it is now. Maybe it's not even a problem, but a different take into what is already there. Yeah, so I think the kind of approach is something that I kind of took from the education all the way down to practice. So it's always about re-questioning and finding ways to address a particular project. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed, all the slides and then your project. And then I also find, your word, free range is, really appropriate, for the thesis that, actually students are committed, in our program. Okay, in a sense, now these days, the architectural practice itself is actually diversified in a sense that, there's no proper, how can I say, the empty site where, we can build a new building. It's not like that anymore. Even in Singapore, a lot of sites are old buildings, and then maybe some of our projects are actually conducted in a museum, and then the barn house. They actually, that can be a new building, but actually it's a combination of our old typology and new typology. So there are a lot of complexities going on, and then architects are actually kind of forced by the context, forced to work on the project, which has, the variety of, possibilities. So I found, it's really interesting. And then the architects are actually required, to be more flexible. And then probably that's what, that you learned in a school, because, our program doesn't really impose, let's say, the fixed solution for architectural design, but rather we ask the students to meander in a free range field, and then to really enjoy the poking here and there, and gradually develop their own kind of a method for the design, and then that actually help the future development of the skills, and then at the same time that is reflected in the practice. So I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Yeah. So maybe we can go back, come back again after, let's say, Marvin's, the presentation. Thank you. Okay. So can Marvin start now?
Yes. So I will share screen first. Right. I hope everybody can see the screen. Right. So so I think as well, I studied in NUS, and but I think I was very inspired by Hui Lian's thesis project and all her architecture project, because I'm not outrightly doing architecture. So maybe if I go through a little bit of what my studio does with some of my partners, you can see that actually every single basis of what we do here is actually inspired by architecture and the things that we have learned through the NUS Architecture School. So interdisciplinary design studio, we do many things, design and curate, and mainly we create experiences for our clients. So for us, design is very much a solution, and we like to believe that we see through design from top to bottom, A to Z in that sense. So this is just something that we work on. We do brand launches. We do design booths. Right. So even right down to the graphics. We launch brands, and in this case is STB's Passion Made Possible brand for them. While launch is just the end activation as to what we actually do. The thinking that goes behind it as to how we launch it changes dramatically. So I think the next project that I'll be sharing, give me a moment. Sorry, there are more graphic projects as well. The main project that I'll be sharing, I will share a little more in detail as to how we go about thinking. And this is why the education that brought us here, me and my partners, who are also NUS students, changed the way we approach things. We believe in a very holistic way of approaching a project. We don't just want to create something that's pretty, and it's never ever really just a singular output anymore, is it? Right? So for me personally, I believe strongly in data and research. I like to have the information to be given, the evidence to be given to allow me to decide what is best for my client. And in this case, what's the best solution that I can tailor for them. So the project that I'll be sharing is this particular one, is called Insecta Irides. Our client is actually Fujifilm. They used to be called Fuji Xerox, if you guys know. So Fujifilm wanted to sell their printer, and in this case, it's called an Irides production press. I'm not talking about your home printers where I think it costs a few $100s, but this is like a $500,000 printer where it's for commercial users. And it's like, how do we actually sell it to people? And do we sell it through like a color swatch book, or we go door to door and explain to people what new colors do they have, and so on and so forth. So in this case, we really had to understand the printer, and I think this was imbued in at least in my design thinking process, to know how to design for a client from school, which is to then understand what the client is actually providing. We took about between 3 weeks to actually fully understand this particular printer, going down with the engineers, understanding how to spec certain swatches of the colors, and then understanding how to then create what this particular project is. We created it into two parts, a part which is primarily to intrigue, and then another part which is the documentation of the color swatch in a sense. We created a narrative to sell the idea of how to use the colors instead of what colors do they have. And of course, the intrigue is to create a series of bugs and jewelry pieces that makes people question, oh, does paper actually and print actually can do all these things? So this is more like an exploration of how to use the printer rather than just what the printer can do. So sorry, my mouse is a bit wonky. Right, so these are like just some of the things that we created, because we need to apply. We need to show that, oh, I can print on newspaper clippings. So we need to create the prints and write-ups on papers that suggest how it can be mimicked. Sorry, we create a 3D. This is actually done in paper and through the color print. So they are doing a metallic print here, and we are trying to showcase how shiny it can be, mimicking even jewelry. So more jewelry pieces. I think altogether we did about close to 36 different jewelry pieces to be showcased. So sorry, yeah, so even more print out. So we needed to bring the audiences, my clients in that sense, through an understanding, through a journey of how we go about exploring, finding these bugs. So through that, we actually share how the prints are being used and how being made. So in this case, it's obviously a lot of gold print, a lot of shiny prints and stuff like that. So again, just more images on what we go about, showing them as an exploration of how to use the prints. So as I've shared, we apply a lot of these effects on different paper types. Again, convincing people to buy the printers through examples, we believe are a better way in going about, instead of asking people to simply just buy the printers. Now, we didn't come out with this solution out of nowhere. It was through a rigorous research through the, I think there are close to about 200 different print houses. We interviewed them, we understood the typology of the people type. We knew that the bosses who are buying these $500,000 printers are of what age. We knew that what are their buying considerations, how do they sell the prints and the services they're selling in order for us to reach this stage of the consideration. So these again are just some of the other print methods. We actually teach within this book how to use spec the different layers in order to achieve the goal output. So obviously you can see there are some color swatches and the black and whites, and then eventually the gold. So again, just an example. So this example is another type where we want to showcase how vibrant the color can be through the printers. So yes, so we even, if you can see kind of like the top hand of it, we actually mimicked how to print money, because again, the printer has the capabilities. I'm not trying to ask you to print money, but the idea that it can reach that detail and that level is the way that we want to explain how powerful the printer is, and in turn, hoping that we can convince the client's client to say, hey, you know, I understand how this works. So, sorry, I'm not going to share that slide. So yeah, I think what school did for us was a little different to Hui Lian's situation. Don't get me wrong, I love architecture, I miss it a lot. And I think the position that we placed ourselves when we were in school, and I worked a couple of years in architecture studios, is that I think the idea of feasibility, the idea of data collection, the idea of understanding the client type gave us a lot of dimensions. And maybe because we are lucky or not, or unlucky in that sense, we were given different opportunities to try out how to use feasibility studies to tackle problems or questions and eventually get to certain answers that we get to. And in our case, we started off with festival curation, we started off with publications, and then we diversified, and I think the studio became hungrier after our degrees. We went and take other diplomas as well, so it kind of pushed us as a very good base, as a really good foundation, in order for us to question what we want to question even more. And we convince clients to take that extended duration of time to understand their product. Like example, we took close to a month to understand the printers in order for us to be able to design something well for them. So these are something that I felt very strongly for, that NUS gave me this foundation for me to understand. So yeah, and that was something that for the last 10 years in Plus we have been doing. And to end my sharing, I do not know whether have I overshot the time. I remember year one, and there's this professor who asked a question, and he has stuck with me, and he stuck with my studio for a while now. And it's that he said, you have to ask the ground what the ground wants to be before you start designing. So we ask that same question every single day when we approach any project. What does it want to be? Not what you want it to be. So yeah, I hope my sharing is a little different from pure architecture, but I hope it helps.
Thank you, Marvin. It was a great presentation of your the printer, and then all kind of experiment with a printer. I find your idea of a consolidating experience is really valid for the industry, and then a design that the creative the experience that you are producing constantly. So I really appreciate it. Yeah, probably it is very important, interesting, because the printer is something about it's a kind of interface between a materiality and then a kind of a digital information. Do you know what I mean? And then this the interface between a kind of a physical reality and then the information, the drawings and then models, these things that architects produce, is a kind of a traditional questions always. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Architects actually, despite that, the architects are not allowed, to construct or making turning it to a material that is more like a construction job. Do you know what I mean? And then we are always limited to the production of the information, which is a drawing and then a models and so on. But always we have to know the relationship and the interface, how things are turned to be, the way it turns to be a physical. So I think that from that point of view, your creative profession is very much related to architecture, and then from that point of view, it's really interesting. So maybe now I can ask that I would like to ask the both of you, okay, what was the kind of experience in the school? I guess, okay, I have been teaching in the NUS Department of Architecture for more than 20 years. So I know what will be what was a kind of a conversation between the tutors and the students. But I don't know so much about this community of students, and then how they kind of learned from each other, and then kind of they developed the vibrant the culture. So if you have any comments on that, William, maybe.
Okay. I think basing on what we had as a thesis, we exist in a group among I had 3 other students. So I think there were, in terms of going through school, it wasn't, I mean, like kind of teacher kind of student kind of relationship. More like, I think it felt a little bit more like sharing and discussion of ideas. So I think I mean, I had you as a tutor, so
Yes.
a lot of times it was more like having conversations with you about the topic that I was working on, the different approaches. And then within, I think among peer learning as well. So within the studio group, we are quite close lah. So I think peer learning, but and also sharing with the professors was kind of I mean, to me it was very intense. Every time after every session, I'll be like, oh no, I have lots of questions. I think it then brings me back to having to do my own research. So I think there was a lot of back and forth in formulating thesis and addressing it. But I think I enjoyed it a lot. I think because it was something that I could really explore and do something that interests me and yeah. It was intense. I remember it was intense, but I think enjoyable in many sense. Yeah.
Yes, the intensity is very significant in NUS. You know, especially when it comes to a review. Not that they actually are criticizing the badly, but we are always trying to kind of the picture the possibilities, various possibilities, for example, and then also the meaning of what the students is doing, so that they actually we can share the kind of different dimensions and so on. So I think that the intensity is really the heart of our the school, and then I appreciate it. Yeah, Marvin, do you have anything? Yeah.
Mine actually, I don't think it's really much different from Hui Lian's. I mean,
Yes.
I think I'm physically it was 2 years. 2 years a junior. So it's been 10 years. But what I think was very I guess prominent for me is that my professor, who's my thesis tutor, is actually my mentor in my life now. So I think that close relationship with Prof. Chia from school, he never really allow us. He doesn't really say no, but I guess he always probes and he always questions, and that's how we keep digging for answers and we push ourselves. The fact of that setting was that approachability of how school works, the way we come together and question and probe. We don't just probe about architecture, to be honest. I think it was way larger than architecture, and that's where the beauty is for me. And in our particular case for Plus is that yeah, he's like our mentor in whatever we do now, even right down to what we are actually every project that we are doing right now in our studio, and we still update him as if he's still our professor in NUS. So I think that relationship and the way the school structured it, I think is really beautiful. And I didn't just get a professor that was paid to do his job. I got a mentor and I got a friend. And that allowed us to push the conversations of architecture a lot more, and even design as a question, as in how we approach it through our daily lives. So I think that particular one is really enjoyable for me, and I think that changed a lot.
Yeah, the Prof. Cha Kopming, actually, he doesn't say no, and then he allows students to explore. I totally agree with him in the sense that that actually education should be like that. In the sense that we tutors also need the students the experiment and then the explorations, and then we to kind of to deviate from a convention, and then they make our studio more creative. We need that. So it's like a collaboration, and then the students, the thinking is very, very important. And then I really appreciate, in a long history of education in the NUS Department of Architecture, actually, they cultivated this culture, and then they developed, the new knowledge, for adding to architectural discipline. Yeah. So yes, yeah. Yeah, I think, the first, the very important thing, for now, and then that we are pursuing actually is diversity. And then there are a lot of, they are thinking and ideas, they are going on. And then we are, in a sense, they're consolidating, the experience in the Department of Art, in our, the MArch program. And then that's the treasure for our department, for our program. And then that will be the experience, that we go through. Okay. All right. So maybe it passed, the 40 minutes. So let me share screen at the end. Okay. So this is for the audience. Okay. If you have any inquiries about, let's say the education fees and the requirement for the applications, and then other informations, please, take a note of this contact. Maybe you can take a photograph of this screen, so that that you can use this website. And then if you need to contact, please contact Mr. Jonathan Leong, for the further information. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. And then we really they look forward seeing you in the school. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. And then thank you, Huilen, and then Marvin. Yeah. Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.